Thank you for joining us today. This is my first experience on doing something like this as well. So, as Missy said, please bear with us. I'm really excited about being here. I have a very short 5 slides that I'm going to talk to, because basically what I'm going to do is share with you my experiences in managing JMT and managing through crisis and some of the secrets that I sort of let guide me. I am actually going to share my screen here. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Okay. So interesting enough, right now, a lot of what we're going through reminds me of the crisis of the recession and what JMT went through and the challenges that we had during that time. And it was, for JMT, it was 4 years long. We had, the main portion, but then we had a bunch of years of recovery. And it was a very difficult time, as it was for most organizations, for-profit and not-for-profit. When it hit in 2008, we had 42 employees, and we were impacted like most organizations and companies were. And by the end of 2010, I had to have laid off half of my team at that time. It was a very, very difficult period, and it went on for years. And as a leader, I worried about every single one of my team. I worried about the people that I had to lay off and how they would continue. I worried about all of my staff that remained and the morale and the culture and the impact that everything was having on them and how I was going to be able to lead them through it. I worried about how the company would come out at the end of it and how our mission and our culture would be impacted by it. And I was extremely stressed and scared. I had fear. And so much of what we're going through right now reminds me of that time. And I never thought, we would be back into something like that kind of a crisis or similar. And yet here we are. We're there today. And, I feel all of those same stress points. At the same time, I'm confident, like I was then, that we'll get through it. Through all the awful aspects, there are also wonderful aspects, and we will get through it. And so what I'm hoping to share here is my personal experiences of running JMT and what helped me get through that crisis and is helping me get through today in the crisis that we're in with COVID and how we're working through it. And hopefully my session here, as well as the sessions that you'll attend after this keynote, they'll help you as well. And I'm going to preface it all by simply saying that this is, here again, my experiences. So, when I think to everything, there are really 5 key guidelines that drive just about every decision I make and guide my day. And they're around, these 5 things: mission, people, cash flow, of course, communication, and then last but not least, empathy. When I look back at any major crisis, as well as just the interim minor crises that might come up during the course of the day, these are the 5 things that are really front and center for me. And I suspect they resonate with all of you as well, because they're very straightforward ones that are front and center, I know, for all of us. So I'm going to start with my number 1 guiding principle, passion, and it's mission. Um, Prior to founding JMT, almost 30 years ago, I worked for a number of nonprofits. I had one small stint in a for-profit, but most of it was with nonprofits. And everything that resonated was around the mission. And when I determined to start JMT, I knew we were going to have a mission, and it was going to guide everything we do. We're not a company making widgets or things like that. We work with people and organizations, and our goal has always been, our mission has always been to support our nonprofit clients in their mission, with what we know and what we can provide, and that's around the technology side. And, I came up with technology and systems and processes because I worked, I'm a finance person, I worked in the back office, and I saw that there was support that was needed, and that it often gets, lost in the greater good of delivering on the mission and the program work. And so I knew that this was an area that was really important and that I might be able to help in. And so that became the mission for JMT. And during the recession and now, and when little things crop up, I think about the mission and how was my decision going to support our mission long term. And sometimes the decisions are really, really hard. For example, laying off staff, one of the most difficult decisions any manager can make. I had to look and say, okay, how is this going to impact my mission? How am I going to be able to support our clients? And so this was, very front and center for me. And I think a lot of times we have our heads down, we're focusing on what we're doing, and we know the mission is there, but it's very hard to bring it back and center us in our thinking and in those hard decisions. And it does give me strength, if you will, when I have it front and center in my decision making. I have to do that, and I also have the job of keeping it in front of my team. And that's probably the most wonderful aspect of it, because when you bring people into the light of your mission, and I do view it as a light, and sometimes you need that light shining through because you're dealing with so much, excuse the language, crap. It recenters you, and the same thing happens when you're able to do it with your team. And so that's the first thing I would share. I'm going to have more quantifiable things such as cash flow, which you saw on the list, but I really want to start with the mission piece because it really is so hugely important. Next, of course, is the people. When I think about, the 30 years of running JMT, whether I'm thinking about a specific year or I'm thinking about a program or initiative or whatever, the very first thing that comes to mind for me are people. I will remember the person or a person's name, what they were doing, how they were engaged, and that's the connection that we have. And as leaders, that's one of the greatest things that we can do is keep that connection between ourselves and on our staff, and also between our staff and each other. I view that as, job number one, right after the whole mission, and keeping the mission and the vision in front of my team is, being there to every extent that I can. And it's hard, and sometimes I can only be there for one or two people, and then they're there for, their staff or their team members or their coworkers, and it's sort of paying it forward, if you will. And in a crisis situation, this is the most important aspect of it. JMT has had remote workers almost from when we started. So we're familiar with working in a remote environment, but even for us, doing it and being used to the technology, perhaps more than others, it's still a very hard thing when we are working in this environment of, stay at home, work from home, and our interactions are now limited to meetings like this and the Zoom. And so, we are social people. I think about, on the one hand, I'm an introvert. Most people would not believe that, but I am. I recharge, if you will, when I have quiet time and space to myself. But right now, I miss the human contact. Love my family, but I miss just talking with others and having that human contact every day. When I travel, I meet, or I'm interacting with 100 people a day conceivably between flights and hotels. And if you just think about, getting up and going to work, and all of our team are missing these kind of things. This going to the coffee shop for coffee, or stopping by at a desk and having a conversation. And so one of the things that I would say is get your teams together however you possibly can. It might just be you and one other person. It might be you and your managers. It might be, your managers and their teams. But there really can't be too much of that right now. That connection, rebuilding of it is so hugely important. And especially in a crisis environment like we're in right now, I think we've all heard the term that, COVID is a battle, or, we're in a war. And in some ways, I think that that's really true. I do view it a battle. When I look at a crisis situation, I look at it as, okay, I'm a general. Here's the playing field. Here's the troops. What's my plan for getting in there? What's my goal that I want to achieve at the end? And I lay out my plan, and then I have to communicate it with my team. You can't go into battle if you are not being upfront and communicating with your team. And here again, I'm going to speak more about the communication aspect, but it's really a hugely important thing to have this connection with your team, and as much as possible. And not just also through the Zoom meetings, picking up the phone and just checking in and having, a 5-minute conversation with someone you might not have a conversation with in the normal course of business. It's just hugely important as a manager to just say, how are you doing? Tell me how things are going. How can I help? And a lot of times your team knows there's technically not too much you can do, but just by the nature of asking, there's a huge amount that you're doing. And so, that's an aspect of, everyone talks about that. You'll hear the expression, people are our most important asset. It is an expression, we all know it, but it's also so true. Our organizations would not be who they are without every single person that works in them, regardless of the role they have or the work they do. And everyone's equally important. And that's one of the things that's so important to keep in front of people. Now, talking about the plan, I'm going to get to cash flow. This is an area that it's tough. It's hugely important. We all know that expression that cash flow is king, and we all know it's true. So I'm not sharing anything there that we don't know. And it doesn't matter whether you're, managing a company, and the size of that company, or your own personal finances. It's all equally important, and it's so key to be in front of it. So with the recession, and now in this, where the economy slowed down on us, and revenue was impacted all over the place. Very first thing I did was I went and updated and created a projection through to the end of the year. Yes, you've been told 8 weeks, might be 4 months. I did it to the end of the year because that's what I do. I also anticipated a worst case scenario, and I start with revenue, and I look at every revenue line that we have coming in, and I analyze where is it coming from, how much is it typically, what's going to impact that revenue so that it can't come in, and I adjust everything accordingly. Once I have the revenue, then I work on the expense side. And I break down, I start with non-personnel expenses. Now, J&T is like most nonprofits. We're not a company selling, widgets or whatever. We don't have inventory. We have people. And so personnel costs make up 70 to 80% of JMT's budget, typical of a nonprofit. So I look at that, I set that aside, and I first tackle those expenses that are not personnel related. And I look through every single one of those, and I break them into 2 groups of essential and non-essential. I start with the non-essential, and I identify, I eliminate everything I possibly can. If it's a contract, if there's a contract and I've identified it as non-essential, I will go back and see if I can get out of the contract or negotiate the contract, defer payments, and I go through all of that exercise. Then we look at the essentials, and that's, obvious things like rent and overhead, and I'm sure, I'm not sharing anything most of you don't already know on this. And then here again, I'll go and look to see if I can do anything around deferring payments, just reducing the payments. This is hugely important, and I'll share more as I get into the actual cash flow. Then I look at personnel. Now at JMT, with our mission and our culture, laying off any team members is the absolute last thing we want to do. And so everything we do is we look at it and see what we make sure we can do so that we don't have to let go of any of our team. We have an amazing group of people, and wouldn't want to lose a single one of them. So we look at, what are the things that we can do? And, we look at benefits, and can we defer any of the benefits, 401k matches, whatever it might be. And then payroll reductions, and the thing is, we're a team, and so we communicate as a team. I communicate as a team. I'm making hard decisions, but I'm putting everything out there so that my team is aware of what's going on, because we're getting through this together. You and your team and your organizations are getting through this together. And I don't want to have a lonely position at the top. It's lonely as it is. I don't want to make it even more so. So communicating is, hugely important. I then pull this all into a cash flow document, and it's updated daily for actual cash flowing in, as well as the cash that's going out the door. Its most important function, though, is it's a daily updated projection of how our cash is doing. And the number one thing here again, because personnel is our number one thing, is payroll. We're living and breathing by payroll. And so I have it going out typically 60 days or more, and everything is being moved and managed to ensure that we can go through properly and meet our payroll requirements. And it is a juggling act. This is not an easy thing when you're in a crisis. I mentioned to you about the recession. I had to let half of my team go. When you're in a situation like this, it is not easy, but you plan as much as you can. You manage through what you can. And, I mentioned about communication, and that's so hugely important because you pull the plan together, but you got to communicate it with the team. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about communication. So, it's really interesting. I have always felt that I am good about communicating. We all know how important communication is, and I've always thought, okay, well, I'm pretty good at communicating. But one of the challenges that always exists, and it happens with me all the time, is I think I'm communicating, and then I find out or I realize I haven't communicated at the level that I needed to, even though I thought I was communicating. And that's what is a challenge for everybody. I think we think we're communicating well or often, and yet you can never communicate too much. Here again, the rest of your team are hugely important in this way too. So, getting your team to communicate with each other, support you in your communication with the greater team as well. The team needs to hear from you. They need to hear your support, but they also need to know that you've got things in hand. And a lot of times you may not have them 100% in hand, but you're working on it. And that's, the other piece is I think and believe that all of our teams look to us, but they know we don't have every single answer. We're human, and they know that. And, but the confidence that we're doing the best we can is hugely important. And, as a leader working through a crisis, that's the main thing that I try to communicate, and probably don't communicate enough, is, here's where I am right now. I don't have a crystal ball. I may not know, this may change next week, but here's where I am right now. And, I ask for my team's support as we get through it. And without exception, people step up. It's an amazing thing. It's really important to share updates, even if you don't have anything to share. It's also important to share the good things and the highlights and the, some of the great things that are going on, and to have your team share. If you're a smaller organization or you're a department or whatever, having a 15-minute check-in in the morning and, or in the afternoon or whatever. Larger companies, you could have a weekly, check-in update. Hoorays and hurrahs and good jobs for each other are all really important. And then also having fun. This is, a piece that, when we're heads down and dealing with what we're dealing with, it's hard to really think about fun. But, creating those opportunities to have fun is really, really important, because that connects you with each other just as much as, communicating about what's happening over in this department or in that department. And there are good things that are happening all around us. And I think, having some sense of that is really wonderful. JMT, it's very interesting. In the past 2 weeks, JMT has been dealing with a situation out of our control. The main challenge actually was made around the communication and lack of. And, we have tried to step in and fill the void, but it really reinforced more than ever, here's a situation of a company, not JMT, but another company not communicating, and how difficult that situation made it for, in this case, our clients and their clients. And that's, external communication. And, we're trying to step in and help. And it just reinforces for me every day how important communication is. Because over the last 2 weeks, we couldn't really communicate too much information because we didn't have it. But we were at least there in front saying, here's what we know, and we can't communicate more. And just by the nature of saying that, we were communicating. And it was greatly appreciated. And, it just reinforced to me all the more that communication is so hugely important. So, the last thing I would touch upon is empathy. One of the most important things we can do for each other is have empathy for each other, both for those that we work with side by side within our organizations, those that are working in another department that we have very little contact with perhaps, those in other companies, and most importantly, empathy for ourselves. We are all going through a very, very rough time, a difficult time right now, a lot of unknowns, and we really have to realize that it's okay. We are going to get through this. We're not expected to have all the answers. We can't fix all the problems. We can just do what we can do. A lot of times I've broken it down into having, an understanding of what's in my control and what's not in my control. For me, I'm used to being in control, and so it's very hard for me when I cannot control a situation or make it better. I am definitely a fixer. And so, I get very frustrated with myself. And then I have to really back off and think to myself, okay, I can't control COVID and the work from home and, all the other impacts that are happening to JMT and to you, our clients. But I can control how we communicate and how often. I can control what services we offer. We can control having a workshop like this. So doing the things that we can do and having empathy, understanding about the things that we can't. And I appreciate how really hard it is sometimes to have empathy. I don't succeed all the time. I get aggravated and frustrated just like everybody. But I would say that if you can manage it, just smile and shift your thinking a little bit, it would be a great thing. Reading articles and attending events such as this is a really great opportunity, because I think it just reinforces we're all in this together. We're all dealing with this. We may not be dealing with the exact details of it, but we're all dealing with the challenges of not being able to be together and connect with each other, the revenue streams not coming in, the demand for services being higher than ever at the same time that the revenue is not coming in, with so many people sick and and dying. This is a very, very difficult time for every single one of us, but we will get through it, and we will get through it together, and we should support each other as we go through it. I really want to thank you all, and I'm going to just recap by saying that hopefully my 5 guiding key will help you. If nothing, then just a little reminder of the very things that you know already. I think most important is there is no magical solution to all of this. It is a matter of what works for you and for your organization. Please reach out to myself or any of the JMT team for anything at all. Even if you just need to have someone to listen to, I would be more than happy to do that, because I know how important that is and how much it can actually help. We're here for however we can support you. Thank you for attending today, and now hopefully Missy has been able to arrange her groups so that you can get into the right sessions.